So fiance number 2. We have made it to the final chapter of the relationships before it's my relationship with myself. Okay, so in order to tell the story of fiance number 2 and I, we have to go back to University of Arizona days. Bear down. Bear down. Go Wildcats. So fiance number 2 and I met. This would have been my sophomore year of college, and I was at a house party with my good friend Hillary, who soon will become my roommate. We weren't living together at the time, but we were good friends. We met in the dorms. She was somewhat newly single. I was dating boyfriend number 1 at the time. It's kind of funny how that works out. And yeah, so we show up to a house party. It's like it's a warm spring day, Arizona. It's like a backyard situation. And fiance number 2 actually approached me at the party. So I was wing-womaning Hillary that night. And fiance number 2 actually approaches me and just is like kind of chatting me up a little bit, filling me out. And I was dating someone at the time. So I naturally was like, hey, like, I'm actually here with my friend Hillary, and like, she's single and like super cute. Like, I feel like you should meet her. So they, kind of chat away and kind of hit it off, exchange numbers. I remember his catch line, which this is like just kind of a random detail to share, but I remember his catch line to pick me up was, he asked me what I've heard is my doppelganger. And at the time, there was a bunch of Anne Hathaway movies coming out, and I used to get Anne Hathaway all the time. I still do, but like a lot in college, because she came out in like The Devil Wears Prada, and so he used that as kind of his little like in to chatting me up and telling me how like he'd always had a crush on Anne Hathaway, and that was his celebrity crush, and how I looked like her. That was pretty cheesy. So fast forward a little bit. So Hillary and he, exchanged numbers, and then I end up like shortly thereafter moving in to be Hillary's roommate. So we're roomies, sophomore year, having a good time, doing single girl. Well, she was single. I wasn't at the time, but just doing girl things. They started talking. They weren't like dating like a couple to my memory, but they were talking. Yes, I introed them at the party. They talked, they mingled, they exchanged numbers. And then I remember Hillary we were pretty tipsy at this point. It was late in the evening. It was like a Friday or Saturday night. She loses her phone there. And I think that this guy's fiance number 2, I think one of his buddies like owned the house. So he was like, hey, like, that was his way to get her number. Like, hey, I'll get your number. If my buddy like finds the phone the next day, I can text you. And I can't remember if it was, no. Well, he would have got my number because I was the one that had my phone. Right. So see what's happening here? So I think, I don't know, that next day, later that week, whatever, we get a text. I can't remember. I think they found her phone. And then we, retrieved the phone, and I think her and I maybe went out, and he lived at a house with a few other guys where they frequently had parties because it was a big house, a huge backyard. So I think we got invited to go to a house party, and she got her phone back and whatnot. And, they flirt and mingle, and I'm mingling with his friends and whatever. So life goes on. And then fast forward, I don't know, I think maybe a few months later, they start like properly dating. And I always felt this flirtatious energy from him. Even when he was with Hillary. And Hillary and I, we've reconnected, and like that's something that I would kind of like to go into a little bit deeper with her. Like, not that it matters now, but in person. But I always felt this flirtatious energy, but he is such a charismatic person where I read it as like, oh my God, this is great. This like really outgoing social butterfly of a guy is dating my roomie / best friend. And like, this is great. And like, we're all going to be friends and it's going to be like, you know, like this big group of like friends all connected together. And so I would brush it off and kind of make excuses, but there was definitely times throughout the relationship where there was for sure inappropriate energy coming from him with just lingering looks. And, you know, she and I, we lived together. Once they got serious enough, like he was spending nights at our place frequently. Our place was also a lot cleaner and a lot nicer because he lived in this like, you know, party college guy's house. So he basically became my third roommate. So he became a really good friend and a third roommate. So we got super close. All of us did. Him and I had a couple classes together. So we would like study together for finals. And I remember anytime we'd go out, which I didn't go out all that much because remember at the time I was dating boyfriend number 1, which was a super controlling, the one that was like anti-party. He lived 2 hours away. So I frequently was leaving Tucson to go up to Phoenix and see him. So on the rare occasion that I was in town, he and Hillary, like we'd all like rendezvous and go out and have a good time. And anytime there would get too many, or not even too many, just flirtatious amount of drinks in our systems, I do remember on numerous occasions him just having just these moments where we'd be at the bar and like Hillary would like go up to the bartender to like, or like go around us to go to the bartender to get another round. And like, it would just be him and I and like one of his buddies. And like, just the way he would like look at me and his eyes would linger on me. Like he was sending me messages with his body language. And I remember, to be completely honest, kind of liking the attention because of my own personal situation, but then B, feeling super guilty because I'm like, this is my best friend's boyfriend. Like this doesn't feel right. And like, even though I hadn't done anything, it just still felt awkward. And then I would just get in my own head about it. And it was weird. I just remember feeling like it just was weird. It was a lot of like weird manipulative games kind of happening. Because he was like clearly very, very into her. I mean, he took her to his vacation family home, like in California, and like they met each other's parents and it was a whole fucking thing. But he always had this like energy with me where I always felt like if he had met me that night and I was not dating boyfriend number 1, like that would have pursued something. So anywho, the next point to share would be, he was a couple years ahead of me. So he graduates, he's from the Bay Area. He moves back to the Bay Area. Hillary and I still lived together. I think she had like one more semester because she was like a grade ahead of me. And so we lived together. Her and I had a falling out because of not related to him. It was related to like boyfriend number 1 controlling me and this whole thing, right? So like her and I kind of went through this like growing apart phase, unfortunately. They, at some point during that point, like when he moved back to the Bay Area and she was still at U of A with me, they broke up. And I remember him like reaching out to me and like asking me questions about her and what she was up to. And oh yeah, he definitely like put me in the middle of it. And I remember like feeling in a really uncomfortable place because I did really value him as a friend. And then Hillary and I weren't getting along at that point and not talking. So I like wanted both the best for both of them. And it was just weird things. And so like I would tell him things like, hey, like she's moving on, you need to move on too. And he would take that and go back to her and be like, oh my God, like I know that you're seeing people. And then she would come to me and freak out at me. So it became this whole like fucked up triangle where I was like in the middle of their relationship and I didn't want to be. Oh my God. It was just, he was prying for information on her because she was like doing her thing. And like one night had a guy sleep over and like, I remember just telling him like, you need to like chill the fuck out and move on because she's moving on. And my intentions were not to like share her business. I totally get why because her and I got in this really confrontational argument in the kitchen. And I'm sure she remembers this too, because it was like very uncomfortable for both of us because she knew that obviously I had shared information about the fact that she had a guy sleep over because no one else but me would know that since I was her roommate. And she obviously, which I could totally see her point, she read it as, you're fucking telling my ex things about me. Like why? And my intention was more like, so-and-so, fiance number 2, like stop fucking putting me in the middle of this. She's moved on. She's hanging out with guys. You go hang out with girls in San Francisco. Like, do your fucking thing. Like, fuck off. Like, that was more my intention. So it was constantly putting me in a bad spot. And then her and I faded away even more after that. She moved back to, I think she went off to grad school. So she graduated. I moved in with another roommate. This guy and so once he graduated and went back to San Francisco, we didn't see each other. We didn't talk really for a while. But he was always like on my Facebook at the time, and I would get random little comments and likes and stuff, but we didn't actually talk for a long time. And then I remember I started working for Stitch Fix. Do you remember this? Yeah. And they're headquartered in San Francisco, and he's from there, lived there. Yeah, and I would go there for meetings and trainings and things like that. And we were friends on LinkedIn and on Facebook, and like I kind of like had followed his life a little bit from afar, like just from social media, as did I as well, or my life. And I remember every time I'd go out, not every time, but like every few times I'd go out to San Francisco, I would ping him just like a little message on Facebook or something and be like, hey, like I'm gonna be in town for the week for like work meetings, would like love to like catch up and just like grab beers. And like my intention was very much like just trying to like, I didn't know anyone in San Francisco outside of him. So that was my intention. And then I remember fast forwarding a little bit into the future. I was still working at Stitch Fix. I remember I went out for a conference or something, and I knew that I don't think he was engaged at that point, but I knew that he had like a serious long-term girlfriend, because it was clear he was posting all these photos of them. Like he seemed super happy. And I remember asking him to meet up for like drinks before I flew back to Arizona. And I specifically invited, and I said, you should bring your new girlfriend or fiance, whatever it was, because I wanted to make sure that it wasn't being read as like I'm trying to get with you thing. Like, I would love to meet her. You seem super happy. She seems super chill. And I remember he kind of like played off like, yeah, I'm like, you would love her, Kris. Oh my God, you would love her so much. Like, she's just like you. She's one of the boys, blah, 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 blah. I don't know what that means. Yeah. But then he didn't actually like kind of act on it. But then I remember him that same trip. So I texted him before I got into the city to ask to like, hey, meet up with them as a couple. And then towards the end of my trip, I hear from him, and it was like my last night there. And I had an early morning flight, and it was like the night before I flew out. I get a text from him, and I remember him saying like, hey, and it was actually one of his buddies, which I'm not going to say his name, but one of his buddies and him were going to like a DJ set in San Francisco. He's like, you should join us. Right. Clearly how he communicated it was like Fiancé was not coming with him. It was just him and his buddy. Yeah. And I remember that was like my first feeling of like, this doesn't feel good, because why are you trying to avoid hanging out with me when your fiancé is there or not there or is there, but now you want to hang out with me when she's not there. So we didn't meet up. That was that. I think at one point I might have reached out to him, or he might have reached out to me on LinkedIn for like some congratulations on a job promotion or something. We very much kept a distance. And then fast forward to March 2018. So I had, if you guys listened to my previous episodes, my fiance number one, we broke up. I broke up with fiance number one February 2018. One of my best friends and I had made a tradition that we'd go wine tasting for her birthday, and her birthday's in March. And so this was this was our second year going. We'd gone once before. It was just our second year going. And was this March? It was March. What was that? Sonoma. Mm-hmm. So I fly in. I had just moved back to Oregon. It's March 2018. I left Phoenix, had just broke up with my first fiance a couple months prior. Just got to Bend. This was literally like the weekend after Right. And this was her 31st birthday. We every year would go to Sonoma. We started a tradition to go to Sonoma, and we did barrel tasting weekend. It was a whole girls trip thing. So I flew from Bend, Oregon to San Francisco, and Alina, Gina, and our friend Lauren were flying in from Phoenix to San Francisco. And my flight got in like 2 hours before them. So I'm just at the airport by myself. And I remember thinking to myself, like, I want to find a cool restaurant we can go get dinner at, because we were picking up our rental car and driving from San Francisco to Sonoma to our Airbnb. And I'm like racking my brain, like thinking, oh my God, like how am I going to pick a restaurant? San Francisco is known for their restaurants. Like there's too many to pick. And it just dawns on me like, oh, like fiance number 2. Thank you. It's so hard not to say his name. Lives here. Like I'll just reach out to him because like he's from here. He can probably point me in the right direction. So I shoot him a text and say like, hey, so-and-so, like long time no see. Hope you're well. I'm in the city, waiting for my friends to get into the airport. I have a girls' weekend planned. Would love to like pick out a cool dinner spot that would be like on route from SFO airport to Sonoma. If there's like any good restaurants that are kind of like on the way that we can stop at for like an early birthday dinner, would love your recommendations. And he recommends some spots. And actually I remember him responding and saying his first response was like, I'm sorry, who is this? I don't have your number saved anymore. Tell him who it is. And then he gives me some recommendations. And I remember him asking me like, oh, are you here with so-and-so? Boyfriend number 2, who was also fiance. And like he had seen my social media, had known that I was engaged, so he assumed that I was traveling with my fiance. And I was like, no, actually we're not together anymore. It's like a girls' weekend. It's for one of my best friends for her birthday. And then he proceeds to tell me that he's on his way to Scottsdale for a bachelor party with his boys, and or maybe already there. And so he's like, oh, so Bob and I won't be able to like meet up with you because like I'm out of town this weekend. And so we spend that weekend kind of off and on throughout girls' weekend. I'm busy with the girls' wine tasting. We kind of text throughout that weekend, and he catching up on live. It's like, oh, what happened with you and your ex? And like, I'm so sorry, blah, 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 blah. I'm like, how are you and your, because at this point he was married. So I knew that he was married. And I'm like, oh, like, how are you and your wife? Like, you guys have been traveling so much, like, so cool, whatever. And he starts to tell me how he's super unhappy in his marriage, and he is in the process of like hiring a divorce attorney and all of these things, and they're like on the road to separation, and things are not good, and this whole like just, you know, dramatic, really sorry story. And I remember feeling like empathetic for him, towards him, because I had not gone through a similar thing, but I had just gone through a breakup too. And like, I obviously wasn't married, but I was engaged. And so I remember just kind of feeling like this connection a little bit for just kind of empathizing for his situation. And by the way, like the way that he painted his relationship on social media, which is all I had to go off of at this point, was very much like they seemed so happy, and they had traveled, and they had like all these great things and all these friends, and they were super social. So I was like surprised by this. And then I'm in the airport. I didn't think I was going to go into this much detail, but we're going to go for it. I'm on the airport. The weekend ends. I'm at the SFO airport, about ready to fly back to Oregon to go back to my life. And the girls had left their flight they'd already caught to Phoenix. And I had like 3 or 4 hours to kill. And I'm at the airport, naturally at the bar, having some wine. And there was this really like nice guy, worked in tech, shocker, at San Francisco airport. And we're chit-chatting about just business and career. And he asked me what I do, and like not even flirting, just having a conversation. And at this point, fiance number 2 had been telling me that, he had been telling me like, oh, my flight actually gets in, I'm landing. So his flight was landing into San Francisco from Scottsdale, from Phoenix, Arizona. Within an hour, like an hour before, an hour after, my flight was supposed to take off to go to Oregon. And so we kind of had joked around about like, oh, it'd be great if like there was enough of a layover, we could like at least grab a beer and just like say hi and catch up. And he at this point is like really like has turned the flirtatious notch up quite a bit, and was like, you should just stay, like get yourself a hotel, like you haven't ever really seen San Francisco, like it'd be so great to like catch up and get dinner tonight. And I'm like 4 glasses of wine in, and I'm like, oh, that sounds fun. That sounds fun. And I think in my gut I knew, because he had told me that he was not in a good place with his wife, and he had painted this picture that he was like very much like they were like separated or like kind of in that place of like agreed mutually that they were like not going to work out, and like he was in the process of moving out and all these things. And so I think part of me that made me feel like a little bit more like I'm just gonna hang out with him and catch up and like support him. So yeah, so I changed my flight. I'm like, whatever. So I like get a hotel, use some travel points, got a hotel, changed my flight free of charge, stay an extra night. I'm like, yeah, like I'll tour around the city tomorrow and like see the San Francisco. And he lands. We meet up at the terminal. He got an Uber. I get into the Uber. And this, mind you, is the first time we've seen each other since college. Right. So this is like, this would have been like 5 or 6 years later. Yeah, because he graduated a year, but I graduated 2014, but he graduated like 2 years before. Yeah, like 5.5 years. Yeah. So there's like, you get that rush when you see someone you haven't seen in so long. It's like, oh my God, all these memories, blah, blah, blah. So I go to my hotel, check in, drop my bags, and then we go to like an Irish pub, and they had like live pianist, and it was like super cool vibes. And we literally sit at the bar and just catch up on so much of life, and like we just talked for hours. And he definitely like was putting on the flirtatious moves, like, just telling me, like, I told him everything that happened with my ex, and he could so relate because of what he was going through, and telling me that I deserve so much better, and telling me that like he'd always like had a crush on me, and how, oh yeah, the whole thing, right? The whole thing. And I'm getting more and more drunk as the night's going on, and he's staring at me because he always had this fucking look. He had this look where he would just like look into your soul and like make you feel like you're the only woman on the face of the earth. Oh my God. And literally making you feel like, oh my God, the princess of the universe just walked in, guys, and here she is. That's how his eyes make you feel. And I fell for it. And he, at one point in the night, leans in, kisses me. We drunkenly make out. And like, I just remember, like, I don't even know. I remember it like being fun and exciting because I kind of had like wanted to know what that had been like for a while because we had this flirtatious past, but also feeling guilty because deep down I think I knew like I don't know the full story in terms of like where he stands with his wife right now, and so this didn't feel good to me either because I never want to be like the other woman. So that was the whole thing. So anyway, I fly out the next day back to Oregon, and we stay in touch, and I'm trying to like remember. We chat, and it's basically like I fall into a relationship with this man. Like we're talking near daily. He sent gifts to me. I remember he sent a pair of Allbirds shoes to me in Bend, Oregon. Like as like, oh, because they were like the new hot like San Francisco shoe brand. It was like a whole tech thing. They're made from like recycled goods. It's like a whole environmental friendly thing. Just random things. And like he booked these flights to go to Red Rocks and see Above and Beyond, this like famous DJ group and electronic DJs. And then all of a sudden April comes around and he has VIP tickets to Coachella, and he played it off like the tickets that he had were like from him and his group, but like now I'm like pretty certain that it was probably tickets that he and his wife had, but they were separated at this point. So he invites me to go, and I was super starstruck because I'd never been to Coachella, and I love music festivals, and I'd been to many but not to Coachella. And he like had family, his family had a vacation home in Palm Springs, and so he had family there that like had homes that we could stay at, so we got to stay for free. So I go to Coachella with him, have an amazing time, and it just was all very like exciting and new and like romantic and adventurous, and like this side of life that I kind of got in doses of on my own, but it was like another level of kind of prestige almost, if you will, with him, because it was like VIP level, like the VIP tickets to Coachella. Everything was kind of like a notch up. So yeah, and then we get to a point where we're like, him and his wife are like fully separated and they're living apart, and I was consulting remote. Yeah.
And then working at 10 but then you had a lead on the job in San Francisco?
Yeah. So I was working part-time at 10 Barrel and consulting, doing recruiting consulting on the side. And then we kind of got, him and I got to a point where, you know, it was like, you know, we wanted to be together. Like our things just progressed so quickly where, yeah. And I feel like I've maybe missed things, but it was just all these romantic experiences where it was super. Oh, and he came to visit me in Portland. I remember, I knew there was something else. He came up to Portland for like a work trip, and then we spent the weekend together in Portland. You did meet him that weekend.
So you were living in Bend still, but
Oh my God, I forgot about that.
to meet Fiancé number 2?
Yes.
That's how we connected.
So I was living in Bend, and he flew up for a work trip, and then like stayed for an extended weekend, and I drove up to Portland.
That's why you
Met up with my dad and stepmom in Portland, and he like met them, and this was before me even moving there. So things were like, you know, progressing really quickly, and we got to a point where it was kind of like, okay, if we're gonna be together, like neither of us wanted to do long distance, and so I needed to either move there or he needed to move here to Oregon. Right. And like I was in a place where I wasn't really tied to Oregon necessarily. My work wasn't keeping me there, so I could move anywhere. So I started applying for jobs in San Francisco. And mind you, I kind of want to just like backstep a little bit because I know this like timeline feels super quick, but like there was so much history between him and I because we'd known each other for 6+ years at this point. And the types of conversations that him and I would have, it was so like, oh my God, Kris, like our story, it's always been you. And I always like had a crush on you, even when I was with Hillary. And it's just like, it was so about this, like, look at our story and how like famous this story could be. Like that was like, and I fell for the whole thing. I remember in the beginning, it felt like overwhelmingly too much because I just had not felt that much, affection and love and attention. Because that's what it's love bombing. That's like what the term is. Love bombing. Psychologists use this too. But it's like this overwhelming amount of love that they shower you with love and gifts and attention and energy and their time and like want to show you the world and you're the only one in their life. And they make you feel this way. And I remember in the beginning, it felt like, whoa, this is a lot. But then like I quickly was like, fell for it because it just I at the time was not feeling super close to my family. Had just got out of an engagement a few months prior that was toxic in its own way, for me. And had just relocated and left all of my dear friends who became my chosen family and picked up my whole life and moved back to Oregon and didn't have any established friendships at that point yet. So it was just like this person who I had this history with was like giving me so much love and attention. And I also had always wanted to live in a big city. Remember we talked about I always wanted to live in New York. And even though San Francisco is not New York, it was kind of like the West Coast New York. And so that was kind of like, hey, like this is my big city opportunity. So yeah, so I started applying for jobs, and it was kind of crazy how quickly it happened. And so I also thought to myself, this is meant to be. Like I applied to a handful of jobs in San Francisco. This was like one of the first 3 or 4 jobs I applied to. I heard back within 2 days, had an interview, had a second round interview, had an offer in less than a week and a half. It was like boom, 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 done. And it was a contract gig to work for a company headquartered in San Francisco. And it was like good pay. Everything was great. I'm like, cool. So what do? I pack up all of my things into 7 suitcases. You come and pick me up. My dad comes and pick me up. And I get on a flight the next day and fly to San Francisco one way with 7 checked bags, my entire life in 7 bags, one-way ticket. And he at the time, or he right now had his own place. So I'm literally just moving in with this person. And I had lived with him before. So I knew that how he lived, and it kind of felt to me, I knew how expensive San Francisco was. So in my mind, it made sense at the time because I could have got random roommates on Craigslist or whatever. But to me, I was like, you know what, let's just try this. And like worst case, if it's like too much, I can just always go get like roommates and like do like a, random roommate situation. But it's not affordable to live in San Francisco on your own unless you make like a shit ton of money. So I move in with him. It felt comfortable and very easy and natural because we used to live together in college. So it just all felt like very easy. And it was this cute little studio apartment. I can't believe we fucking lived in a studio together. That's insane. And I remember him telling me that he was in the same neighborhood as he used to live with his ex-wife. But he failed to tell me the very small, minute detail that it was literally the apartment building across the fucking street from where him and his ex-wife lived. So that came out after I moved there. So that was like yellow flag. Should have been a red flag, number one. And I remember feeling like walking around, like once I found that out, I remember like walking around to get coffee and stuff on the weekend with him and just thinking to myself, like every time I go to turn the corner, I'm like, oh my God, what if we run into your ex-wife? Like, I don't know what to say. Like everyone hates me. Like everyone thinks I'm the other girl. So it was the whole thing. And I remember as soon as I moved in, I mean, within a couple of weeks, he was wanting to like rendezvous with his friends. And I was so nervous to meet his friends because I knew at the time though, like how it would be perceived on his friends' end, because I was this girl from college that like is now with him. And like a lot of them were friends with his ex-wife and how I was going to be perceived. And so I kept telling myself like, Kristen, you just got to go into this with confidence and just be yourself, and they will eventually like warm up to you or not. And like, that's fine, but like, you can't care about that. So from the beginning, I was pretty true to myself. But I remember there was a lot of people, but a couple people in particular that were close with his ex-wife that really gave me the cold shoulder and were not warm at all. Yeah. And I had to have a lot of like heart-to-heart conversation and just being like, hey, like I'm not trying to like fuck with your friend right now. Like I really do care about him and we go back a long time and you know, my intentions are good kind of thing. So that was a whole thing. So I moved to San Francisco, didn't have any friends of my own. I don't know what's important next to share. So that was May of 2018. Fast forward to, it was great in the beginning. We traveled all over the place. We went to Europe. We went to wine country. We went to his parents' vacation home in Palm Springs. We went to Hawaii. We went to India. We went to Tahoe multiple times. We went to Singapore. We went to Indonesia. Like the list goes fucking on and on and on and on and on. So it was very wonderful. It was very exciting. It was also very exhausting. Yeah, because I remember I just moved to this amazing city. Like San Francisco is beautiful. There's so much to do. And it was like every other fucking weekend we're traveling, doing something. There was so much like keeping up with the Joneses, so much FOMO. Like we couldn't be missing out on anything. Like of all of his friends. Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh my God. He's the king of FOMO. Oh my God. Are you kidding me? It was like, oh my God, if his friends were off doing things, posting about going to wine country, it's like, oh my God, we have to go to wine country next weekend. Like, cause you're around when you're in San Francisco, at least in the circle that he ran in, there's, you know, people are well off and people travel and people do a lot of things. And no one at that point had kids yet. So it's a lot of disposable income. And it was just like always having to do things. And I remember him starting to post photos of us on his Instagram so early on. It made me so incredibly uncomfortable. And I remember even telling him like, you should maybe like cool it. Like your divorce is like, at that point, I don't even remember if his divorce was finalized yet legally. It was pending. And I remember him posting photos of us and it just felt so just inappropriate to me. But he played it off like he was just so happy and he just wanted the world to know how happy he was. Yeah. But yeah, it was amazing. And there was so much love. There was tons of date nights. And he was literally that Prince Charming that every woman pictures being like the gentleman lover romantic type of figure that you'd want. Like that was him. We're talking about like if there were any red flags out during that pre-engagement. Yes, I remember the one big red flag that stands out to me, and all my good girlfriends in Arizona will remember this because I called a few of them. we were out. It was like a Friday night. We were out on a date night. Pre-engagement, pre-proposal. So this would have been, it was like January of 2019. So I had been there for, would it be like 8 months? Yes. So we've been together about 8 months. We had, at this point, definitely there had been like conversation about engagement, and he'd asked me what kind of ring I would want, and I told him, and but I genuinely felt like this was something that he wanted to just know for like a year's time, or like later in the year, like whatever it may be. But I remember we were out on like a Friday night, and it was just him and I having a date night. I remember we were actually at Tipsy Pig. Sitting on the back patio, and it was supposed to just be like a chiller Friday night, right? Because we kind of had like, I think, a travel weekend the weekend prior, so like let's just like lay low and like go to bed early and like watch a movie, whatever. And we're at dinner, like sharing some wine and dinner, and a couple of his good buddies, it was a co-ed group, some of his friends had showed up, just happened to show up, and we're there too because it was a freak spot that we frequented. And it very quickly became this, and I kind of went into like girlfriend social mode, right? Because every time we'd mingle with his friends, I was always like, I need to socialize, I need to bond with these people, these are his best friends. So I was kind of like on this like on mode. Yeah. And this was kind of like an opportunity for me to bond with some of these girls too that I hadn't had one-on-one time with them. So low-key night turns into a party night. So we end up like bar hopping all around the marina and Cow Hollow, and it was a whole thing. And had a great time. Like we were all vibing and dancing and drinks. It was just great. And I remember the last bar we were at that we closed out on, I remember his energy started to shift a little bit. Like, cause I was like dancing with the girls, and like it was kind of like the girls were vibing and the guys were all chit chatting. We're all having a good time. And I remember his energy just started to feel a little weird to me, and I couldn't place it, but cause I was a little bit drunk at this point. And we're walking home. We get home, get into our apartment. He immediately has to go to the bathroom to relieve himself. And his phone was on the coffee table in front of me. And I'm sitting on the couch kind of just like relaxing and like drinking water. His phone's on the coffee table. And I remember his phone, like he had Instagram up, and like he'd left the Instagram app up, and the phone was like on the table, and he rushed off to go pee. And I remember just sitting there, and I happened to like glance down, and I see like a little like notification of like a message that had just been sent. And I click on his DMs because I'm like, oh, who's that? Because it was like a handle name that I didn't recognize, and it was a girl's name. And I click on that, and I see that he had reacted to her Instagram story that night. So this is like 2:30 in the morning, right? We closed the bars down. He had like reacted to her story like at 1 a.m. that morning while we're all out at the bars, and said something like, oh, cute, or hey you, or hey cutie, something like that to her story. And it was like, clearly it was like a story of her like in her girls out looking sexy, right? And then she responded and just, I don't know, said hi, what's up, something like that. And I remember I saw that, and I was like, what the fuck? Like, who the fuck is this? And this was a name, and I clicked on her profile, and this was a name that he had never mentioned. So it's not like it was like a good girlfriend of his, or like one of his sister's friends or something. And I'm not one to like keep things in. Like when something bothers me, I'm just going to call it out right then and there. So as soon as he gets out of the bathroom, I'm like, who the fuck is blah, 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 blah. And I remember actually saying it like decently calm, like not coming at him too hot, but I was just like, who is this person? And he immediately got in like defensive mode, and it became this like, oh, she's just a friend. And I'm like, why are you responding to her Instagram story at 1 a.m. when I'm out with you and all of our friends? And like, you have a little smile. This is a little flirtatious. Like, this is not appropriate. And we got in this like 4-hour long argument. I don't think I slept at all that night. I ended up calling out sick of work the next day because I was just like so sleep deprived that there was no way I was gonna be able to function. And we stayed up arguing the entire night. And I remember I felt like I was arguing with a brick wall. Like there was no like sense of awareness of why that was inappropriate. And I remember like at this point I had hung out with his parents several times and like had built a relationship with them, and like, you know, knew that like their values in terms of like what they put off to be like for a healthy marriage, like what is respectable or not. And I remember looking at him and being like, do you think that if you showed your mom and dad this message and who this was, that they would approve and think that this is appropriate, considering that we are like talking about engagement and like all of these things? And nothing was getting through his fucking head. He just painted this whole picture like, it's nothing, it's nothing, it's nothing. So that was like big red flag number one. And then fast forward, I think it was literally 2 weeks later. Yeah, 2 weeks. Oh, and then I remember, okay, so the next day, or at some point that weekend after that whole red flag thing happened, I remember like calling my girlfriends in Arizona, and like I went down into the garage in the apartment building and sat in the car because that was the only way I had privacy because we had a studio, and like told them everything and was just like, am I overthinking this? Because I was getting in my head because the way he was responding was so like, this is no big deal. And I just needed someone to like gut check me a little bit, like, because this did not feel good to me. So I talked to my girlfriends about it, and a little did I know that 2 weeks later he was planning the proposal. And all of those girls that I had talked to about that were invited to come. It was a surprise proposal. Yeah. Yeah. So fast forward 2 weeks later after this big blow up, which we somehow make up for it, and he swears that he won't do it again, and like, oh, I'm sorry, I was just drunk, blah, 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 whatever his fucking excuse was. So we fly to San Diego for like what was supposed to be my birthday weekend. It was my birthday weekend. And it ended up turning into him proposing to me, complete surprise, as we're hiking on a cliff on the side of the ocean. And then we get back to the Airbnb, just him and I, and lo and behold, three of my best friends drove all the way from Phoenix to San Diego to be there for the proposal. And the two of the girls in that group I had called in tears, kind of like confiding in, and 2 weeks prior. So that was a little awkward. But they showed up anyway. So yay, friends, for being good friends. But, and then we get to dinner. So I'm already like, oh my God, my best friends are here. This is so much. I just got engaged. And I'm like over the moon, but also very overwhelmed. And then getting smashed with like, your best friends drove all the way here and they're staying with you this weekend. And then we get in Ubers and we get to dinner, and oh my God, here's your dad and your stepmom, and here's my parents. And it was a whole fucking thing. And I remember going into the bathroom at that restaurant, and I had to stand in the stall and just breathe because I was just so overwhelmed. I was so happy to see you. I was so happy to see my friends, but I was just like, what? Like, this is way too much. It was so much. Sensory overload. But we celebrated that weekend. And then
So this is February of 2019.
February 2019, proposal. So life's great. We're engaged. We're high on life. He meets mom and dad Jim. Yeah, we met mom and dad Jim in Redding. We did like just a day trip and met them halfway. They drove down from Bend and we drove up from San Francisco. And I remember at that point that we went to brunch, and I remember fiance number 2 opened my door because that's what he did always, because he was such a gentleman. And my parents got in the back of the car and I was in the passenger, and he was driving. Fiance number 2 was driving. And I remember he like opens the door, lets me in. And then as he's walking behind the back of the car, dad Jim taps my shoulder from the back seat he's sitting in and is like, hey, I really like him. And I had never had him respond that way to any of my previous boyfriends. So I'm like, yes, got parents' approval. Everyone loves him. This is great. We're great. My life's this big adventure. It's so much fun. Living in San Francisco. It's all great. But yes, and then fast forward to March? Yeah, March of 2020 is when pandemic started. Yeah. Yeah, we moved out of the marina and moved into Mission Dolores, just a couple blocks away from Dolores Park. Upgraded to a 1-bedroom. Still at the same company. He's still at the same company. Moved to a new apartment. So, okay. Yeah. There was a couple other, okay, so for the most part, there's like, it's wonderful and beautiful. I mean, this is the kind of man that like buys you flowers every week and like surprises you with dinner. You come home from a long day of work, and he knew that I had a long day of work and was like stressed out as fuck. I'd come home and he would have flowers on the table and music playing and offer me a foot massage and have dinner cooked. Like, this is the kind of shit that like he was every woman's dream, like literally all the time. All the time. He was so thoughtful, so charismatic, so charming all the fucking time. Moved in together. I moved in with him 2018 March. We got engaged February 2019. And then that summer, we came up with his parents to venue shop. We flew up. I don't remember. I'm trying to think of where we stayed with, because I remember that summer we flew into Portland. Where did we stay in Portland? Because we went to Hood River and we toured the venue with his parents, and they saw the wedding venue that we picked out in Hood River. I'm sure. Did we hang out with you guys? We must have. We went to McMinimans, Edgefield. Yes.
That was right after you landed, though, off the plane.
Yes, and then we drove to Hood River, and okay, that's what happened. Now it's coming back to me, because it was mainly a trip to be in Bend, to hang out with Mom and Dad Jim, because you guys had met them over Christmas. So my dad and stepmom had met his parents the Christmas prior, so that intro had already happened. And so the point of this trip was, now we're engaged, and we're coming up to Oregon, and like his parents are meeting my mom and stepdad for the first time. So we flew into Portland, met up with you guys for beers at Edgefield, sorry. And then we went to Hood River that night, slept there, and then toured the wedding venue the next day, and then drove to Bend, and we had an Airbnb in Bend, and that's where my mom and stepdad live. So then it was a whole like parents meeting parents weekend, and it was super. I mean, it was fun. There's a lot of charisma and energy, and it was all great at the time. Oh, but you asked me another red flag outside of the little Instagram-y message thing was, I remember we were at his parents' vacation home in Palm Springs, and I'm trying to remember if this was I think this was his pre-engagement or post-engagement. Oh, I can't remember, but it was sometime between, in our relationship before the pandemic. I remember we had an iPad that we bought together, and he had his phone synced to the iPad, so his text messages would show up on the iPad. And we're sitting out, we had the whole house to ourselves. I think we went out for like a President's Weekend or MLK. It was like something where it was like just him and I flew out for the weekend, and his parents let us have the house, and we had tanned all day and just like had drinks at the pool, and it was like super chill. And I remember I was like on the iPad looking at flights for like somewhere where we were traveling to after that, and I clicked on like the text message bubble on the iPad to like text a link to myself for this like hotel or something that we wanted. And I see on the like text history, I see one of his colleagues' name that he worked with, one of his peers, a male manager. And I can see, you can like see the preview of a text message before you actually open it up. And I see something like, so damn hot or something. And it, like something caught my eye to like click on it. So I click on this message, and he's like in the pool, and I click on this message, and I see that he had texted so he was a manager of the company, and his peer was a manager. And I remember he had texted his manager commenting on a female in the office, a new hire that had just joined the team, that was a direct report, and said something about like, so-and-so looks so goddamn sexy today, or so goddamn hot today. And I remember just being like, oh, wow. So that stung a little bit. Cause like, and I'm at this point now, like, and I took like an hour to process before I brought this up with him, because I remember thinking to myself, like, okay, calm down, Kristen. Like, I'm not a super jealous person, but like it's like, I'm aware that like we're all human. We're all going to acknowledge other attractive humans, but this is not appropriate. Like, I would never like send a message, let alone say, but like send a message to my colleague calling out like another colleague's sexiness when I'm engaged to someone. I'm pretty sure we're engaged at this point. So that was like a whole thing. So I called him out on it. Yeah. I called him out on it. And this one, I don't think he could really dig himself out of. So he just like profusely apologized. And I remember I got flowers and flowers for days after that. Like, sorry, flowers. And he knew he fucked up. So he was like really trying to dig himself out of that one. But ever since that was the first time. So we were engaged, yes. I remember that was the first time that I then at that point started to feel uncomfortable with females that he worked with. And like I never before that had, because he talked very openly about all his colleagues and how close he was and all these things and all these inside jokes. And it was just like, he was just so close and like so popular where he worked, right? So fast forward to, actually, I don't think we were engaged, but now I remember going to one of his work holiday parties with him. And that name of that girl that I had saw on that message a few months prior, or whatever it was, like stood out to me because I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to be seeing her tonight. And I kind of wanted to like, just see, you know, like what is so hot. And I remember going into that, like that was, so I went to 2 of his work holiday parties. And the first one, I remember feeling very like, I was putting on a face like I was totally fine and confident, but internally I was so nervous because that had been kind of eating at me for a while. And I was nervous that I was going to meet her and like she was going to be this beautiful girl, which she was, but it was just going to be like this. I just knew that it was going to cause tension between our relationship. So I had to look like super amazing to like feel better about this. So we go, and I remember I had definitely creeped on her LinkedIn or something. So I had an idea of what her hair color and stuff was. So when I see her, I know it's her. And she was cute, like great, awesome. She was there with a boyfriend or a date. And I remember I remember seeing her, and like him and I were like on another side of like the room. And then I excused myself to use the restroom or something or get like another drink. And then I come back and he had walked over to go talk to her, like perfect timing as soon as I left. It was just there was just always little things. And as soon as I came over, he didn't even make a point to introduce me. It was just this like weird energy where then I'm feeling like the jealous girlfriend on the side that's like an idiot. It just felt weird. And then fast forward to, so that must have been first holiday party. And then second holiday party had a similar experience with kind of something like that. And then, yeah, and then here we are, March 2020, living in San Francisco. And
Pandemic hits, you all have to work from home.
oh, and let me add that the Christmas before the pandemic, where we spent Christmas in Bend, Oregon with Mom and Dad Jim, and we bought gifts for each other. And his final gift to me was a gift card that showed a receipt that he had put a deposit down on Riley. And he gifted Riley to me. So we had talked about getting a dog for a while, but like I wasn't ready yet for the responsibility. And he was really pushing for it. And I just remember being like, oh, this is a lot. We have a tiny apartment. We both work a lot. And he got put a deposit down on a miniature golden retriever, my pride and joy, Riley Zervis. The best thing that came out of that relationship. So I just wanted to kind of add that detail in. And then, yeah, March 2020. So his birthday is in March. And his birthday pandemic had already hit. Okay, so things start shutting down like early February, and all of a sudden it's like full-blown pandemic, right? Everyone remembers this. His birthday is a few weeks like after like full-on shutdown. And I remember how bummed he was to be celebrating his birthday in this way, because he was the most social person ever. And he can't go out. So I like did this whole thing where I like went to the store. Yeah, because you guys were in it. I went to the store and I like got stuff to make him this big birthday breakfast. And I like a week or two beforehand, like reached out to all of his family and his bestest friends and my parents and had them all pose with things that you would find around your home and I designated everyone a letter to spell out a happy birthday, his name, with an exclamation point sign. And I had them all do a different letter that I designated to them. So then you were the exclamation point. You were. And so then I would have this, and I even went to fucking Best Buy and bought a fucking printer because I didn't have a printer. So I could print, because it's the pandemic, like nothing is open. So I went to the store to get a printer and buy ink so that I could then have everyone email them to me, their photos. And then while he was sleeping or before he got up that morning of his birthday, I printed out all these words. I had the sign of like happy birthday with his name, exclamation point on the wall. And I had the breakfast made for him. And I even ordered on Amazon because he was such like a total fucking bro with like his beer pong. And so I ordered a beer pong table and beer pong cups, and we had a little patio at our apartment. So I put like decorations on our patio and like made Zoom call invites for like, you know, his virtual birthday party, basically, right? We all remember these. We all had one. So did all these things, and he was like loving it. And then I remember that night, you know, it's the evening of his birthday, and I remember like we're getting ready for bed, and I'm trying to be sexy and intimate and like wanting to show him some birthday love, if you will. And he wasn't into it. And then that was like the first time that he ever turned me down sexually. And that was like a massive, what? Like, what? Yeah. We up to that point had a very like, very regular, healthy, consistent sex life. And so that was completely like that was not normal. But then I remember thinking, okay, like he's pretty drunk, like, you know, maybe whatever, let's go to bed, whatever. Wake up the next morning, and then we kind of go for like a couple days of like nothing, like no intimacy, and all. It just was weird. It was like all of a sudden on his birthday, it just changed. And then that's when I remember like noticing like he'd never turned me down, at least to my memory. And then I'm trying to think. So like his birthday is mid-March. I'm sharing too many details. I can edit that out. So we like don't have any forms of intimacy. And I remember like, so the pandemic had been going on for only like a few weeks, really. I mean, it was obviously very traumatic and like intense in the beginning, because we all were like, I think all of us were thinking that like this is going to kind of be over soon, and then it just kept extending. But I remember it was like towards the end of the month, so only like a couple weeks after his birthday, when I started to feel like I was living with a roommate, and it was just this weird energy shift where we weren't intimate anymore all of a sudden. And he was, I mean, naturally we're all glued to our phones because we're trying to stay connected, but like his obsessiveness with his phone and like his behaviors with his phone started to get uncomfortable and like weird. So just little things like he, every time we get up to go to the, like we'd be watching a movie after work, right? And he would get up to go to the bathroom, just do quick, like what seemed like a quick like pee break. And he would always start taking his phone all of a sudden. Like he never would leave his phone on the coffee table. He became just like his behaviors. I started noticing like weird things. And just in my gut, I was like, something doesn't feel right. And then I remember one night, this was like a Sunday night or a Monday night. I know we had to work the next morning. We stayed up watching like a documentary, and we go to bed. And I'm like rolled over on my side facing the wall, and I have my back to him, and he's sleeping on this side of me. And I remember like having a really hard time falling asleep that night. And I think I had tried to kind of like make out with him or like, initiate something, and got turned down again. So I was also like feeling like self-conscious about that. And I remember like opening my eyes and seeing the reflection of his phone light on the wall. And my back was to him, but it was clear that like he had his phone open. And this was like 1:30 in the morning at this point. So, and then I just remember all of a sudden my heart started beating so fucking hard. I remember thinking that my heart was going to pound out of my chest. Like I could hear my heartbeat in my entire being. And I remember just thinking to myself, like, I need to either go back to sleep or roll over and say, what the hell is going on? Something was wrong. I don't know why I felt so like worked up. And so I'm like, there's no way I'm going to be able to sleep tonight. So I flip over. And as soon as I flip over and he realizes that I'm awake because he thought I was asleep and I moved, he had his phone like on the furthest side away from me, and he like flipped his phone over upside down and like pulled the covers over it. And then I just went into like freak out mode, because then I'm like, what the fuck are you hiding? Because like I knew something was up. And so we get in this pretty heated argument, and it kind of escalates, and we're raising our voices at each other. And I'm like trying to grab his phone. Like I had never in my life have tried to like physically pry something from someone's hands. And I was trying to grab his phone from him because I just knew that there was something on there that was not okay. And he was clearly going to take it to the grave. And he gets up and goes to the bathroom and locks the door. And then comes out maybe 20 seconds later and throws the phone at me like on the bed. He's like, here, fucking look whatever you want. And I'm like, oh, thanks. After you deleted everything? Yeah. Like, I'm not even going to bother. So that was like big blow up, number one. And then Riley was up sick that night, or the next night I think it was that night. She got kennel cough, and so I was up all night with her. She had really bad kennel cough, and I had to take her to the vet the next day, and it was a whole fucking thing. She's a puppy, and I remember calling my best friend Carly and just feeling like so lost and confused and just like not knowing what was going on. And it was more of this like unknown that was eating at me, because it wasn't like I just found out something. It's like I knew there was something, but I didn't know what it was. And at the time, we had our house in Austin that we were renting out as an Airbnb property. I was running it as our short-term rental, and there was no one in it, obviously, because it's the pandemic and no one's traveling. And I don't know if it was Carly gave me the idea, but somehow I got the idea to go to Austin. So
You're working remotely.
We're all working remotely. And I'm like, I need to get the fuck out of here because I just needed some space to like clear my head. And we were just like, it was toxic to be in the same space together. And, because back up. So the next day after we went to sleep, I slept on the couch that night because I was like, I can't be near you. He wouldn't give me anything. And then the next morning we chat, and he tells me that what he was hiding from me was a picture that had been sent in his group guy chat from one of the single guys in the group it was like a nudie or an inappropriate photo of a girl. And he knew that if I saw that, it would make me uncomfortable. He's fucking full of shit. He's full of shit because I'm not one to get triggered by those kind of things. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I wouldn't get mad at you if one of your buddies sent something like, so either you responded and said something very inappropriate to it, or you're lying and there's completely something else. So he just kept lying and digging his hole and digging his hole and digging his hole, and things kept changing. The story changed a little bit. I'm like, you're just fucking lying. So I book a one-way ticket to Austin. I pack bags. I don't tell him I book a ticket. And then I'm cooking dinner one night, and he actually, I think, brought up like, maybe we should consider going to Austin. I'm like, well, I actually bought a ticket to Austin, but like, I'm going by myself. You're not coming. I need some space. So I fly out to Austin with all my stuff. He stays there with the puppy. He was not happy about that, by the way. Like, he was like, oh my God, I have to deal with this puppy all by myself. You fucking got the puppy. You have to deal with the puppy. Fuck you. So I get to Austin, get to the house, and I spend like a week there by myself, just like thinking, reflecting. And we had a bunch of like on the phone conversations. And I were just like talking to like Paul and Carly like several times that week, just like trying to get a male's perspective too from Paul. And like Paul was just so lovely and just wonderful, and as Carly was. And I remember Paul just telling me like, this is not appropriate behavior, and like you need to like set your boundaries and grounds for like what is appropriate conversation, and like how a soon to be married man should be talking about his girlfriend or fiance, and how he should be talking about other women in respect to you, and all these things. And so he comes out to Austin, fast forward like a week and a half. So I'm there by myself. He flies out to Austin, brings Riley. She's like, oh, little baby girl. Oh, your baby. She must be. So this is so she was only like 2 months old. She was super little. And we lived together in the house and kind of like settle in for like the short term of the pandemic that we thought was a short term. This is going to be one of those like weird things where I don't know where to go from here.